I wake up at first light, a habit left over from 32 years as a fire inspector. My alarm clock reads 5:30 in the morning, but I turn it off before it can ring. At 63, sleep isn't what it used to be. The apartment greets me with silence. I can only hear the ticking of the old wall clock that Verna and I bought for our 30th wedding anniversary. Now it's another mute witness to my loneliness. I make coffee, strong, with a pinch of cinnamon the way Verna liked it, and step out onto the small balcony. Baton Rouge is waking up. Neighbor boy Tony is delivering newspapers. Mrs. Holbrook is walking her corgi. Drivers are rushing to work. It's a normal day in Louisiana. The coffee's bitter. Verna said I always overdo the quantity, but in 4 years I've never learned how to make it right. Some things I can't do without her. Today is a special day. My birthday. Audrey invited me to dinner. Actually, she sent me a text saying, "Come over at 7. It's your birthday." No daddy or happy birthday. Just a statement of fact, like she's doing her duty. Maybe she is. The daughter has changed since her mother died. We both changed, but in different ways. I became withdrawn. She became hardened, especially when Perry came into her life. I'm not thrilled with her choices. Perry Hobbs is a financial analyst with ambition beyond his abilities. He's the kind of guy who always knows what's best for others. After the wedding, Audrey distanced herself from me. She called less often, visited less often. And when they bought a house in the suburbs, our meetings were reduced to holidays and birthdays. Or rather, they didn't buy it, but I helped them buy it. I made most of the down payment. My savings from all the years I'd been working. Verna would have approved. She always wanted Audrey to have a better life than us, but Verna didn't live to see that day. I go back to the apartment and start packing. In the bathroom, I take a long look at my reflection. The wrinkles have gotten deeper. My hair is almost completely gray. There are bags under my eyes. I haven't slept well in the last few weeks, and the aching in my joints is worse than usual. Old age doesn't make anyone look old, but I still had the same determination in my eyes that I had when I was younger. The same determination that had gotten me through dozens of fires and saved more than one life. Order and cleanliness is another habit left over from work. I eat breakfast oatmeal with blueberries, wash dishes, wipe down countertops. Always keep the place clean. You never know when you'll get home. If you do. How many times have I said that to young firefighters? I've lost count. The day drags on slowly. I read Hemingway, watch the news, do the crossword puzzle. Later I go to the store for wine. Dry red. That's what Audrey likes. Or used to, I'm not sure. It's been so long since we've had a real conversation. I pass a cake shop and buy a chocolate cake. It says, "Happy birthday." It's silly to buy a cake for your own birthday. But I want to believe that Audrey has forgotten about the dessert, and that my gesture will be seen as a help, not a rebuke. At home, I change into my best shirt, the dark blue one Verna gave me for our last anniversary. Audrey said it made me look younger. I put on my only decent jacket and shine my old leather shoes. Before I leave, I pull a file from the safe. I open it, run my eyes over the lines. It's all there. Certificate of title to a house at 97 Magnolia Avenue, in the name of Ralph Whitaker, my name. Not Audrey's, not Perry's, mine. Back then, 5 years ago, I insisted the house be titled in my name. "It's just a formality, Dad," Audrey said. "The notary said it would be easier with the bank. We'll retitle it later." But the remortgaging never happened. At first there was no time for that. Renovation, settling in. Then Verna got sick, and the world turned upside down. And after she died, I was in no hurry to give away the only thing that gave me any influence over my daughter. I knew it was wrong. Verna wouldn't approve, but she couldn't disapprove of anything anymore. I hadn't planned on using that trump card. Honestly, this file is like a gun in a safe. You know it's there, but you hope you never use it. But the last time I saw Audrey and Perry, their disregard, their blatant desire to get rid of me. Something broke in me then. "You're becoming a burden, Dad," Audrey had said last month when I'd asked them to stop by after I'd sprained my ankle. She didn't. She sent groceries by courier and a message. "Sorry, Perry and I are very busy. Feel better." I close the folder and tuck it into the inside pocket of my jacket, just in case, like a weapon you take with you, hoping you won't have to shoot. In the cab, I stare at the streets of Baton Rouge floating by. The city is changing, new buildings, new faces. I'm changing too, but in a different way. I'm shrinking like shagreen skin. Audrey doesn't realize it. For her, old age is something distant and abstract. At 35, she's full of energy and plans. For her, my existence is an annoying nuisance, a reminder of what awaits her someday. We drive up to the house. It's 2 stories tall, with white columns and a manicured garden. The American dream for which I paid $120,000 of my savings. In front of the house are 2 brand new cars, Perry's BMW and Audrey's Audi. Together they cost as much as half the house, but they never have time for Dad. I pay the cabbie and walk slowly to the front door, wine in one hand, cake in the other. My heart is pounding like I'm about to face an important challenge. Part of me hopes that tonight will be different, that we'll finally talk, that Audrey will remember sitting on my shoulders as a child while I told her about the constellations, how I taught her how to ride a bike and how proud I was of her first A in math. But another part of me, the part that keeps the paperwork in my inside pocket, knows that hope is futile. That tonight will end like dozens of previous ones. Strained smiles and relief when I finally leave. I ring the doorbell. I wait. I ring it again. Finally, the door opens and Audrey appears on the doorstep. She's beautiful, hair gathered into an elegant bun, light makeup highlighting her blue eyes. Verna's eyes. "Daddy," she says without a smile, "you're early." I glance at the clock. 6:55. I'm sorry. The cab driver must have been speeding. She looks at the cake in my hands, a flicker of irritation in her gaze. "Why? We already have dessert." I shrug. Figured it wouldn't be superfluous. Audrey steps back, letting me into the house. I inhale the familiar smell, a mixture of citrusy perfume and roasted meat. Voices come from the kitchen, Perry and someone else. A woman's voice, young, ringing. "Are we having company?" I ask, taking off my coat. "A friend from work," Audrey answers briefly. "And her husband. Not a family dinner then. Not just for me. Well, that explains a lot." I follow my daughter into the living room. There's a bottle of whiskey and glasses on the coffee table. Perry is standing by the fireplace talking to a young couple. He notices me and nods, no smile, no greeting, just acknowledging my presence. "Ralph's here," Audrey says, and her tone makes me wince. Not Daddy, not Father, Ralph. It's like I'm a stranger. The folder in my inside pocket feels heavier. Maybe today's the day, I think. Maybe today I'll have to get it out. But I smile and hold out the wine. "Happy birthday, Ralph." "Meet Cassie and Brandon." Perry points to a young couple sitting on the couch. They smiled synchronized smiles at me with duty smiles. Cassie works with Audrey at the insurance company, and this is, Audrey's dad. Not even a first name, just Audrey's dad. As if I were some nameless piece of furniture that had to be introduced to the guests. "Ralph Whitaker," I introduce myself, extending my hand. "Pleased to meet you." The handshakes were sluggish, like people who are embarrassed by the very fact of my existence. I could clearly see the question in their eyes. What was this old man doing at a party of the young and successful? "Ralph was a fire inspector," Audrey said in the tone of a tour guide presenting a museum exhibit. 32 years, I added, trying to keep my voice casual. "Retired 4 years ago." "Wow," Brandon said, clearly not knowing what else to say. "You must have seen a lot of fires?" I was about to answer, but Perry was already picking up the conversation. Speaking of work, Cassie, did you tell Audrey about that new system they're implementing at the main office? And the conversation took a different direction, leaving me out of it. It's a classic move to change the subject when the old man starts talking about the past, as if my memories were something unseemly, like talking about illnesses at the table. I sat in a chair in the corner of the room, watching the lively conversation. 4 people were discussing work, politics, the latest movies. It was as if I didn't exist. Perry periodically filled glasses with whiskey, but he never approached me with a bottle. I didn't insist. Alcohol doesn't go well with my medication. A half hour later, Audrey announced that dinner was ready. I was the first to head toward the dining room, but Perry stopped me with his hand. "We're eating on the veranda tonight. The weather's nice." Well, that makes sense. There's a long table on the veranda that can seat 5 people comfortably. Or maybe they didn't want me inside any longer than necessary. I was the last one out on the porch. The table was already set with plates, utensils, and wine glasses. The table is decorated with candles and flowers in a low vase. It's beautiful. Verna would approve. "Sit here." Audrey pointed to a seat at the far end of the table, as far away from the others as possible. I sat down. Perry poured the wine they'd made ahead of time, not the one I'd brought. My gift remained untouched in the hallway, as did the cake. The first course change was a shrimp and avocado salad. Delicious, but too pretentious. Audrey had never liked seafood until she met Perry. He changed her tastes, her habits, her attitude toward me. Or maybe just revealed something that had always been hidden. The conversation at the table continued without me. I caught bits and pieces of phrases, something about Cassie's promotion, about how Brandon was tired of his clients. He was a tax consultant, it turned out. About Perry's plans to invest in some startup. "You have a beautiful home," Cassie said, turning to Audrey, "especially the garden. Did you plant it all yourself?" Audrey blossomed. "Yes, I worked with a landscaper. Have you seen the rose garden? We're planning to expand it next year. We're also thinking about a pool," Perry added, "on the south side of the property. A small one, but heated so we can use it almost year-round." I couldn't take it. "A pool? Really? That's a huge expense, and you'd have to get a permit from the municipality." Everyone fell silent. Perry smiled, that condescending smile I hated so much. "Ralph, we've done the math. Our finances are in order." "Of course," I took a sip of water from my glass. "It's just strange that you didn't mention it before." "Why would we discuss it with you?" Audrey said it quietly, but there was metal in her voice. Cassie and Brandon exchanged awkward glances. There was a heavy silence at the table. I started, but Perry interrupted me. "Let's talk about the good stuff. Cassie, you said you were planning a vacation in Europe?" Once again, I was left out of the conversation. I ate the next course, steaks and potato gratin, in complete silence. The food was sticking in my throat. I thought of Verna, of how upset she'd be to see what my relationship with her daughter had become. "And you, Ralph, are you traveling?" Brandon asked suddenly, apparently out of politeness. "Not lately," I answered. "Not since my wife died." "Dad hasn't done much since Mom died," Audrey put in. "He sits in his apartment all day long." "I have activities," I countered. "I volunteer at the local library. I help out at a support group for the elderly." "What an accomplishment," Audrey muttered. "Audrey," Perry said quietly, but without much reproach. "What?" She turned to him. "He comes here, criticizes our plans, and what does he do? What kind of example does he set? Sitting alone, feeling sorry for himself." "I'm not feeling sorry for myself," I said, feeling my anger boiling over. "I'm just living my life. And I wasn't criticizing, I was asking. I have a right to wonder what's going on in the house I paid for." "Oh, God, there you go again," Audrey rolled her eyes. "Yes, you helped with the down payment. We're grateful. But that was 5 years ago. We pay the mortgage. We keep the house. It's our house. I clutched my napkin under the table. The file folder in my inside pocket felt like it was burning through my jacket, but I restrained myself. Of course it's yours, I said conciliatorily. I just wanted to be in the loop. To be in the know? Audrey laughed, but there was no mirth in her laugh. Since when have you been interested? You didn't even call me when I broke my arm last year. I didn't know, I said confused. You didn't tell me. Should I have? You're my father. You're supposed to feel these things. It's not fair, Audrey. I shook my head. I'm not psychic. No, you're just a bad father, she cut me off. Cassie and Brandon sat still, clearly regretting accepting the dinner invitation. Maybe we should, Brandon began, but Audrey wouldn't listen. You know what my mom said to me before she died? Her voice trembled. She said, take care of your father, like you're a helpless child. And I tried. I really tried. But you won't even give me a chance. A chance. I gave her a puzzled look. What chance? To be your family, she almost shouted. To be your support. But no, you prefer your loneliness, your depression. You pushed me away as soon as Mom died. I didn't push anyone away. My voice got quieter. I was just, coping as best I could. You handled it well, Audrey said venomously. So much so that now you come in here and tell us what to do with our house. I didn't tell you. Yes, you did. She slammed her palm on the table. You always do that. You come in, you give us that judgmental look like we're doing everything wrong. Audrey, I think that's enough, Perry said softly, but she just waved it away. No, let her know. Let her know that Perry and I don't have to put up with his constant nagging. This is our home, our life. We decide what we do and how we do it. I kept quiet, looking at my daughter. She looked so much like her mother in that moment, the same fierce blue eyes, the same crease between her eyebrows. But Verna had never spoken such cruel words. Perhaps I'd better go, I said, starting to rise. Yes, perhaps. Audrey stood up too. And you know what? Maybe you shouldn't come at all anymore. We don't have room for you. Get out. The silence that followed those words was deafening. Cassie covered her mouth with her hand. Brandon stared at his plate. Perry froze with his glass in his hand before it reached his lips. And I felt a strange calmness, like something clicked inside. A limit, a line, a point of no return. I slowly pulled the folder from my inside pocket and placed it on the table. You know, Audrey, I said quietly but clearly, you shouldn't have done that to me. What's this? She frowned, looking at the folder. The deeds to the house. I opened the folder and pulled out the front page. The certificate of title. In my name. Not yours, not Perry's. Mine. Audrey blinked, not understanding. What the hell was that? The house is in Perry's and mine. We signed the deed with the bank. You signed the mortgage agreement, I nodded, but the house itself is registered to me. It was a stopgap measure, remember? To simplify the process with the bank. You suggested it, and I agreed, but the re-registration never happened. It's some kind of mistake. Audrey turned pale, grabbed the document, and started reading. Perry stood up and walked over to her, looking over her shoulder. His face changed, too, when he saw my name in the owner column. What the hell, Ralph? He said at last. Did you cheat us? No. I shook my head. It was honest. You knew about the arrangement. It's just that no one remembered the formalities afterward. I didn't. 5 years, Audrey whispered. 5 years we've been living in a house that's not ours? Not ours? Legally, yes, I confirmed. But I never planned to use that against you. Until today. What are you saying? Perry's voice had a troubled edge to it. I slowly folded my hands on the table. I want respect. I want to be treated like a father and father-in-law, not an annoying old man. I want to be a part of your life, not just when you need money. Or what? Audrey squeezed out. Are you going to kick us out? If I have to, I kept my composure, though my insides were screaming with pain. I hope it doesn't come to that, but yes, by law, I have the right to demand that you vacate my property. You can't, Audrey whispered. We're paying the mortgage. We have a contract with the bank, which is in my name. I nodded. I could sell the house tomorrow and the new owner would have the right to evict you within 30 days. It's in Louisiana state law. Cassie and Brandon sat frozen like statues. They probably never expected to witness such family drama. You won't do it, Audrey shook her head. You're bluffing. Shall we test it? I shrugged. I've already consulted a lawyer, it's all clear. That was a lie. I hadn't talked to a lawyer, but at that moment, I needed to look confident. You're a monster, Audrey exhaled. Mom would hate you for that. The words hurt more than I expected, but I kept my face. Maybe. But Verna certainly wouldn't approve of the way you're treating your father. I stood up. You have 3 days to decide. Either we patch things up or I sell the house. It's your choice. I turned and walked toward the exit, hearing Audrey's suppressed sobs behind me and Perry's confused voice. This is some kind of mistake. There must be some explanation. Taking my coat, I walked outside without looking back. My heart was racing and my mouth was dry. I did it. Burned the bridges. I drew my gun and fired. Calling a cab, I sat on a bench by the road and looked at the house. There were lights burning in the windows, but it no longer seemed warm and cozy. Behind those walls was the collapse of a family. My family. Part of me wanted to go back, to take back the words, to say it was a joke, a cruel joke, but a joke. The other part, hardened by years of fire and death, knew that sometimes you have to lose everything to start over. The cab pulled up. I took one last look at the house and got in the car. Where are we going? The driver asked. Home, I answered. Just home. The apartment met me with silence and darkness. I didn't turn on the light, just sat in the chair by the window looking out at Baton Rouge at night. The city lights blurred before my eyes, whether from fatigue or unsolicited tears. What have I done? The question throbbed in my head like a toothache. I pulled out my phone, no calls, no messages. Of course, Audrey must be furious, or shocked, or both. My thoughts went back to that day, 5 years ago, when Verna and I had decided to help Audrey and Perry buy a house. Verna had begun to weaken then, the first signs of illness that we'd blamed on age and fatigue. This will be our gift to them, she said, going through our savings accounts. They're young, they need support. I was less enthusiastic. Perry seemed overconfident and wasteful to me. They'd been married 3 months, and he'd already bought a new car and convinced Audrey to quit a promising job for a position at his friend's company. $120,000 is almost all of our savings, I argued. What if something happened to it? Divorce? Bankruptcy? It happens. Verna looked at me then with that special smile she saved for when she thought I was too pragmatic. You always expect the worst, Ralph. They love each other, and they're not children. It's precisely because they're not children that they need to take responsibility for themselves, I insisted. I don't mind helping, but let's be careful. In the end, we found a compromise. The money was in exchange for putting the house in my name temporarily, until I was sure of the stability of their marriage and their financial situation. Audrey grumbled, but agreed. There wasn't much choice. The real estate market in Baton Rouge was booming, prices were rising, and we were offering a third of the value of the house here and now. Have it your way, Daddy, she said. But it's just a formality. In a year or two, we'll have it all reissued. The next day, we went to the notary and signed the papers. I remember Perry looking through the papers carelessly, clearly thinking more about how he was going to spend the money he'd saved on the down payment. He even joked something about how I was now a homeowner in a neighborhood that Verna and I would never have been able to move into on our own. I didn't think much of it at the time. 6 months later, Verna was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer, Everything started to spiral. Hospitals, doctors, medication. There was no time for paperwork. Audrey, to her credit, supported her mother. She came to the hospital, helped with household matters, though I could see how hard it was for her to look at Verna fading away. Perry showed up less often. There were always reasons, work, important meetings, urgent matters. One day I caught them arguing in the hospital corridor. Audrey was saying something about needing his support, and he was saying he couldn't stay stuck in this depressing place all the time. When Verna died, something broke between Audrey and me. We both grieved, but in different ways. I withdrew. She threw herself into her work and social life. She started calling less, visiting less, and then she started treating me like a burden. The question of remortgaging the house never came up. At first I didn't care, then it was awkward to ask, and then I started to notice how she and Perry were living. New cars, expensive vacations, renovation after renovation. I knew Perry had a career in finance, but still their spending seemed excessive. So I thought, what if they're in debt? What if this house was the only thing they had left if everything went to hell? So I kept the deed, like insurance, like a guarantee that a little piece of Verna, her care for her daughter, wouldn't be wasted. I didn't plan on using that power. I really didn't. But their attitude was getting worse and worse. Especially after that ankle incident where I literally couldn't leave the apartment and Audrey hadn't even taken the time to stop by. The ringing of the phone snapped me out of my memories. Audrey. I picked up the phone but didn't have time to say a word. I talked to a lawyer. Her voice was icy. It's true. The house is in your name. I didn't say a word. What can I say? You've known and kept quiet all this time, she continued. 5 years. 5 years, Dad. We paid the mortgage, put money into repairs, into improvements, and all that time the house was yours? You used it, I answered quietly. You lived there. I never interfered. Not until today, she cut me off, when you decided to take us by the throat. You started it first, Audrey. We have no room for you. Get out. Your words, not mine. I heard her heavy breathing. She was trying to hold it together. I was upset. You're always criticizing our decisions, judging our lifestyle. I asked a question about the pool. Just a question, Audrey. It's not about the pool, she was practically screaming. It's about what you always do. You sit in the corner with your judgmental look, and then you ask just questions that are actually rebukes. I covered my eyes. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was really judging their lifestyle, their wastefulness, their superficiality. But did that justify her words? So what now? I asked. What do you want? Are you serious? Her voice oozed venom. You threatened to kick us out of our house, and then you ask me what I want. I didn't threaten to kick us out. I said I have the right to do so if you continue to treat me like a waste of space. Turns out you've seen us as a threat all these years, she said after a pause. You didn't even trust us enough to be honest enough to admit that you'd registered the house for yourself. Didn't trust me? Now I was getting angry. Audrey, I gave you $120,000. No strings attached except for the formal retention of title. In 5 years, I've never interfered in your affairs. Even when I saw you spending money left and right, I kept quiet. It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of respect. Oh, respect, she laughed bitterly. And how are we supposed to respect a man who lied to us for 5 years? I didn't lie. You knew the house was in my name. You just forgot, or chose to forget. We thought it was temporary, that you changed the deeds a long time ago. And you never checked? In 5 years? I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. Really, Audrey, you and Perry aren't that naive. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard her quiet voice. Perry wants to talk to you. He's on his way. Now? I looked at my watch. It was almost midnight. Yeah, now. He thinks he can talk some sense into you. Okay, I agreed. I'll be waiting. She disconnected without a goodbye. I sat staring at the faded screen of the phone and felt a strange emptiness inside. What was I going to say to Perry? What did I want to hear from him? 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw my brother-in-law, disheveled with reddened eyes. He wasn't in his usual business suit, but jeans and a sweater. "Ralph," he nodded, walking into the apartment. "We need to talk." I gestured him into the living room. He sat down on the couch and I sat in the chair across from him. Between us was a coffee table, a framed picture of Verna, and a 5-year-old lie. "I talked to our lawyer," Perry began. "He confirmed that the house legally belonged to you." I nodded silently. "But that doesn't mean what you did is right," he continued. "You deliberately hid that fact from us all these years." "I didn't," I countered. "I just didn't remind you. You didn't ask. I didn't tell." "It's manipulation, Ralph, and you know it." Perry shook his head. "You let us believe the house was ours. We put our souls into it. Audrey picked out every detail. I did the backyard with my own hands. And all this time you've been living there," I reminded her. "For free, basically. Because your mortgage payments are for the loan, not the house itself. The house was paid for with my money." Perry clenched his fists but held back from saying anything harsh. "All right," he said at last. "Let's get this straight. What do you want?" I looked at him carefully. At that moment, Perry seemed more reasonable than usual. "I want to be treated like family, not like an annoying old man who is tolerated out of politeness," I said slowly. "I want my opinion to be respected even if it doesn't match yours. I want Audrey to remember that I'm her father, not just a man who once gave her money for a house." Perry was silent for a long time, pondering my words. "And if we, change our attitudes, you'd sign the house over to us? That's it. It's about the house, not the relationship, not the respect, the house." "Maybe," I said evasively, "but not right away. I need to make sure the change is genuine and lasting." "So you're going to hold this over us like a sword of Damocles?" Perry grinned. "Behave, kids, or Grandpa will kick you out." "You can see it that way if you want," I shrugged. "But I just want to make sure you don't go back to your old attitude once you get your papers." Perry stood up and started pacing around the room. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was calculating the options, weighing the risks. Financial analyst in all his glory. "You know what the ironic thing is?" he finally said. "Audrey genuinely thought she cared about you. In her own way, of course. She always told me, 'Dad's so stubborn he'll never admit he needs help. He's stuck in the past, doesn't want to move on.'" "Help?" I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "What kind of help? When had I ever asked for help?" "That's the thing." Perry sat back down on the couch. "You never asked. But Audrey felt she had to take care of you, like she promised her mother she would. It's just that her idea of caring is, well, peculiar." I remembered Audrey's numerous attempts to organize my life after Verna's death, lists of doctors I had to see, suggestions to move to more appropriate housing for a single elderly person, insistent recommendations to enroll in groups for widowers. It all felt like an intrusion, an assault on my independence. I fought back, she insisted, and gradually it became a cold war. "I didn't ask her to take care of me like that," I said. "I asked for respect and attention, just human companionship." "And she saw it as your unwillingness to accept reality," Perry nodded. "Your inability to adapt to life without Verna." He said my wife's name in a particularly soft way, and I suddenly realized that maybe I'd misjudged my son-in-law all those years ago. "You know," he continued, "when I first met Audrey, she was always talking about you and Verna. What wonderful parents you were, how you supported her in everything, how proud you were of her accomplishments. She adored you both." "And then?" I asked quietly. "Then Verna got sick, and everything changed," Perry said. Audrey wasn't ready for the thought of losing her mother. She was angry at the illness, at the doctors, at the world. And at you too, even though you had nothing to do with it. She thought you'd given up, that you hadn't fought hard enough for Verna. I did everything I could. My voice trembled. We consulted the best doctors, tried experimental treatments, but it was too late. I know, Perry nodded. And I think Audrey knows too. But she needed someone to blame. And then when Verna died, she needed someone to take care of. Her way of coping with grief was to control everything around her. I listened to him and realized that maybe he was right. Maybe my daughter and I were both wrong in our interpretations of each other's behavior. Maybe behind her insistence on helping was not condescension, but fear of losing me too. And behind my resistance, not stubbornness, but fear of losing the last shreds of independence. And now what? I asked. Perry stood up. I don't know, Ralph. Honestly, I don't know. Audrey's furious. She thinks you betrayed her trust. That you've been waiting all these years to use the house as leverage. That's not true, I countered. I never planned this. It's just, she crossed the line today. Maybe, Perry shrugged. But it doesn't matter what you planned or didn't plan anymore. What matters is what you did. And I have to say, it's impressive. I never thought you had that kind of toughness in you. I could detect a note of respect in his voice. Strangely, I thought he sounded sincere. I'll talk to Audrey, he said, heading for the door. I'll try to calm her down, but I can't promise it'll work. She's inherited your stubbornness. I walked him to the door. Perry, I called out to him when he was already on the doorstep. I really didn't mean for things to turn out this way. He turned around and gave me a long look. You know what's funny, Ralph? I believe you. But Audrey sees this as a betrayal, and I'm not sure she can forgive it. He left me alone with my thoughts and doubts. In the morning, I was awakened by a phone call. I did not immediately realize where I was. I had fallen asleep in the chair. Audrey's name popped up on the phone screen. I answered, preparing myself for another barrage of accusations. But her voice was strangely calm. We discussed the situation with Perry. We've decided it can't go on like this. What do you mean? I asked cautiously. We're not going to grovel and play your games, she said flatly. If you want the house, take it. We'll move out. Audrey, this isn't what I wanted. What did you want, Daddy? Now there was bitterness in her voice. To manipulate us? To make us dance to your tune? I'm sorry, but we're not going to do that. We'd rather lose our home than our dignity. I just wanted respect, I said quietly. You can't get respect by threatening, she said. You know that. So what's next? I asked. Next? She grinned bitterly. Perry and I are going to start looking for a new place to live. And you'll get your own house, and total loneliness to boot. Congratulations, Dad. You finally managed to destroy the last semblance of family we had left. She disconnected, and I sat there staring at the phone, feeling the emptiness growing inside. I'd won the battle, but I seemed to have lost the war. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I had made the right choice. 2 days passed in ringing silence. Audrey didn't call. I didn't call her. It was like a confrontation between two stubborn men, and I realized that we had both inherited this trait from my father, a man who could go weeks without talking to a neighbor because of a poorly thrown word. I stayed in my apartment, looking through old photo albums, rereading the letters Verna had written to me when I was away on professional development courses in other cities. Sometimes I wondered, what would she say now? Would she approve or disapprove of what I had done? There was no answer. On the third day, the doorbell rang. I opened it expecting to see Audrey, but there was Perry, alone. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped back silently, letting him into the apartment. He walked into the living room and sat down on the same couch as last time. Audrey doesn't know I'm here, he said without preamble, and frankly, I'd rather keep it that way. I raised my eyebrows but nodded. I'm here to talk about the situation, Perry continued, to try to find some kind of solution that will satisfy everyone. I'm listening, I said, sitting down across from him. Perry looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, and the stubble on his chin suggested that he hadn't shaved in days unusual for a man who was always careful about his appearance. "Audrey's serious about moving out," he said. "We've already started looking at apartments. Her pride is hurt, and you know how stubborn she is." I nodded. "I know, of course, just like me. But I don't think it's wise," Perry continued. "We've put too much into this house, not just money, but time, effort, emotion. And financially, it's going to take a heavy toll on us. A mortgage, a new lease, or buying—" "I don't want you to move out," I interrupted him. "I never wanted you to. I just wanted to be respected." "I understand," Perry nodded. "And honestly, I'm starting to see your point. The way Audrey treated you at that dinner. It was wrong. I should have intervened, but I didn't. And for that, I apologize." His words took me by surprise. I didn't expect an apology, especially from Perry. "Why didn't you say that before?" I asked. "Over all these years?" Perry sighed and rubbed his face with his hands. "Honestly? Because it was more convenient. Audrey had always been emotional about you. A mixture of guilt, anger, resentment, love. After Verna died, she was constantly vacillating between wanting to take care of you and resenting your resistance. And I just wanted a quiet life. It was easier to agree with her than to confront her." "And what's different now?" "Everything," Perry said. "You turned the situation upside down with that house announcement. And you know what's ironic? It made me see you in a whole new light. Not as a boring father-in-law, but as a man who can stand up for himself, who won't let you wipe your feet." I didn't know what to say to that. On the one hand, I was pleased by his confession. On the other hand, I was sad that it took such a drastic step to earn his respect. "What do you suggest?" I finally asked. "A compromise," Perry answered. "You let us stay in the house. Audrey and I start treating you with the respect you deserve. Regular visits, phone calls, family dinners without insults. And gradually, as the relationship matures, we revisit the issue of remortgaging the house." I considered his proposal. It sounded reasonable, but there was one major flaw. "Audrey won't go for it," I said. "You said it yourself. Her pride is hurt." "Let me work on that." Perry leaned forward. "I can be persuasive when I want to be. I just need you to be willing to compromise when the moment comes." I looked at him carefully, trying to figure out his motives. Was this a sincere desire to mend the relationship or just an attempt to keep the house? "Okay," I said at last. "I'm willing to compromise, but not for the sake of a check mark. I want real change." "Fair enough," Perry stood up. "I'll talk to Audrey. But don't mention our meeting until I say so myself. She's, on edge." I walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned around. "You know, Ralph, I always thought your job, checking buildings for fire safety, was pretty boring. But now I realize you must have been pretty darn good at it. Spotting problems before they become disasters is a special talent." With those words, he walked away, leaving me with mixed feelings. Was it a sincere compliment or a subtle manipulation? With Perry, one could never be sure. The next few days passed in suspense. I went about my daily routine, reading, cooking, going to the library, and to senior support group meetings. But my thoughts kept returning to Audrey, Perry, and the house situation. I began to question my decision. Maybe I had really overreached. Maybe I should have found another way to reach my daughter. On Thursday, on my way back from the store, I ran into a neighbor, Estelle Price, a widow in her mid-50s who had moved into our house about a year ago. We occasionally exchanged a few words when we met, but we never spoke closely. "Ralph," she smiled welcomingly, "I haven't seen you in a long time. Is everything all right?" "More or less," I answered evasively. "Just a little family trouble." Estelle nodded understandingly. It's never easy with children, especially when they grow up and decide they know life better than we do. I looked at her in surprise. How did you know it was a daughter? You have that look on your face, she smiled. I'm a mother of 2 grown sons myself. I know that look, a mixture of love, pride, and a desire to shake them by the shoulders. I couldn't help laughing. Estelle had caught my feelings exactly. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? I suddenly suggested it. It seemed like I could use the distraction. I'd love to, she nodded. Already in the apartment over tea and cookies, I suddenly told her the whole story. About how Verna and I had helped Audrey and Perry with the house, about how the relationship had changed after my wife's death, about the ill-fated dinner and my ultimatum. Estelle listened attentively, not interrupting, only occasionally nodding or frowning. Do you know what the strangest thing is? I said, finishing my story. Perry seemed to take my side. He came by, offered a compromise, even apologized for his behavior, and not a word from Audrey. Estelle stirred her tea thoughtfully. It's not so strange if you think about it, she said at last. Perry is a pragmatist. He evaluates a situation in terms of gain and loss. For Audrey, on the other hand, it's an emotional issue. She feels betrayed. Betrayed? I was surprised. I gave her $120,000. I never interfered in their lives. How could that be betrayal? It's not about money, Ralph, Estelle said softly. It's about trust. In her mind, you made a pact. You help with the house, and the house becomes theirs. Yes, technically it was in your name, but in her mind it was a temporary measure. And now she finds out that you've been holding that trump card up your sleeve all these years. To her, it looks like a betrayal. I thought about what she said. Maybe Estelle was right. What mattered to Audrey was not the legal side of the issue, but the emotional side. Not what I had the right to do, but that I could even consider such a move. So, what do you think I'm wrong about? I asked. Estelle shook her head. I'm not talking about right or wrong. I'm talking about different perspectives. From your perspective, you were defending yourself against disrespect. From her perspective, you were using power to manipulate her. Both perspectives have a right to exist. What am I supposed to do now? What do you want in the end? She asked. For Audrey and Perry to stay in the house? For the relationship to work out? Or are you willing to sacrifice the relationship for principle? I was silent for a long time, pondering her question. What did I really want? To punish my daughter for disrespecting me, to bring back the intimacy, or just to prove that I can't be treated like a waste of space? I want Audrey to be happy, I said finally, but not at the expense of my dignity. I don't want to be a doormat that people wipe their feet on and then remember at Christmas and birthdays. Then stand your ground, Estelle nodded firmly, but be ready to compromise when the time comes. And remember that pride is a bad counselor for both sides. Her words stayed with me even after she left. There was something comforting about having someone listen to me without judgment, just trying to understand. I hadn't felt that kind of support in a long time, not since Verna's death. The next day, Perry called and suggested that we all meet together, me, him, and Audrey, at the small Magnolia Cafe on neutral ground. I agreed, though I wasn't sure it was a good idea. Audrey could still be too angry to have a constructive conversation. The Magnolia Cafe turned out to be a cozy place with round tables and wicker chairs. I arrived 15 minutes ahead of schedule and chose a table in the corner, away from the other customers. I ordered tea and waited. Audrey and Perry showed up together, right on time. Audrey looked tense, back straight, lips pressed into a thin line. Perry, anxious but determined. Dad, Audrey nodded briefly, sitting down across from me. Thanks for coming, I said. The waitress came over to take the order. Audrey got only water, Perry an espresso. So, Audrey began as the waitress stepped away, Perry said you're ready to compromise. I cast a quick glance at Perry, so he'd presented it as my initiative. Yes, I confirmed, deciding to go along with his version. I never wanted you to move out. That wasn't my goal. What was your goal? Audrey's voice was challenging. I wanted your respect, I answered bluntly. Not condescension, not pity, but respect. Like a father, like a man who loves you. Audrey pressed her lips together even tighter, but she remained silent. I propose the following, I continued. You stay in the house. We start over again with respect, with regular communication, with a real relationship, not formal visits on holidays. And when I'm confident that this change is genuine and permanent, we'll revisit the issue of remortgaging the house. So you're going to hold this over us as a threat? Audrey asked. Behave or Dad will kick you out. I wouldn't call it a threat, I argued. More like a guarantee. I don't want you to pretend for the sake of the house. I want a real relationship. And if we don't agree? Audrey looked me straight in the eye. Then you have two choices, I said calmly. Either move out or buy the house from me. I'm willing to sell it to you for the same price I paid 5 years ago. $120,000. Audrey looked at Perry. I could see that they hadn't expected such an offer. We need time to think about it, Perry said. Sure, I nodded. I'm not rushing you into a decision. We sat in silence while the waitress brought our orders. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile. Progress, compared to our last meeting. How are you? I asked Audrey, trying to lighten the mood. Is everything okay at work? Fine, she answered briefly, but then she added after a moment's silence. I got a promotion. I'm deputy department head now. Congratulations, I said sincerely. That's great news. Thank you, she softened a little. How are you? Is your ankle healed? Yeah, it's fine now. I was touched that she remembered my injury. We continued talking, carefully with long pauses, but still talking. Audrey talked about a new project at work. I talked about my support group meetings. Perry was mostly silent, only occasionally inserting remarks. He seemed pleased with how our conversation was progressing. When we finished our tea and coffee, Perry apologized and left, saying he had an important work call to make. Audrey and I were left alone. You know, she said after a pause, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and while I still think what you did was unfair, I'm beginning to understand why you did it. You do? I was surprised by her words. We really didn't treat you the way we should have, she continued. After Mom died, I didn't know how to act. I thought you were shutting yourself in, that you needed help but you wouldn't take it, and I was angry at you for it. And I didn't want to be a burden, I admitted. I didn't want you to take care of me out of obligation. I wanted to be your father, not a helpless old man to take care of. Audrey nodded as if truly understanding my point of view for the first time. We could try starting over, she suggested cautiously. No manipulation, no hard feelings, just like father and daughter. I felt a warmth rise in my chest. It was what I'd wanted all along, just recognition, just respect. I'd like that very much, I said quietly. At that moment, Audrey's phone rang in the cafe. She looked at the screen and frowned. Sorry, it's work, she said, standing up. I have to take this. She walked outside and I remained seated at the table, feeling oddly relieved. Perhaps not all was lost. Maybe we could rebuild what we'd destroyed. A couple minutes later, Perry returned. He looked pleased with himself. How's it going? He asked, sitting down beside me. Better than I expected, I admitted. Audrey seemed ready to reconcile. I told you, Perry smiled. I just had to give her time to cool down and think. At that moment, Audrey returned, but instead of sitting down at the table, she stopped, looking at us with a strange look. What's wrong? Perry asked. It wasn't a work call, Audrey said slowly. It was Laura. She said she saw you coming out of Dad's house last night. Perry froze, his face impenetrable for a moment. Why would she say that? He tried to make a joke. It must have been a mistake. Don't lie to me, Audrey raised her voice. Laura lives on the same block. She knows exactly what you look like. You met with him behind my back, didn't you? Perry and I looked at each other. There was no point in denying it. Yes, Perry admitted. I went to see Ralph yesterday, and the day before that too. I was trying to find a solution that would satisfy everyone. Behind my back, Audrey repeated, pain in her voice. You were discussing me with him, planning how to talk me out of it. Audrey, that's not true, I began, but she interrupted me. Shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses, both of you. You both betrayed me. She grabbed her bag and started to put on her coat. Audrey, please, Perry stood up. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, her voice shook. You chose a side, his side, against me, against your wife. I didn't choose sides, Perry countered. I was trying to find a solution that would work for everyone. Behind my back, Audrey cut him off. Well, now you're going to have to make a real choice. It's either him or me. Make up your mind. With those words, she turned and walked briskly toward the exit. Perry froze for a moment, then gave me an apologetic look and followed her out. I remained seated at the table, stunned by what had happened. A situation that seemed to be starting to get better had suddenly gotten worse. Not only had I now had an argument with my daughter, but I was now causing conflict between her and my husband. I paid the check and slowly walked home, immersed in gloomy thoughts. What had I done? Was it worth it? Maybe I should have just accepted the way things were and not tried to change them. Estelle called in the evening. She wanted to know how the meeting at the cafe had gone. I told her briefly about the disaster. I'm sorry, Ralph, she said sympathetically, but don't blame yourself too much. You couldn't have foreseen that this would happen. I destroyed my daughter's family, I said bitterly. No, Estelle said firmly. You just demanded the respect you deserved. The way Audrey reacted and the choices Perry would make were their decisions, not yours. I felt a little better after talking to her. Estelle had an amazing ability to find the right words. I caught myself thinking that I was looking forward to our next meeting. There was someone in my life who understood me, and it was nice. Late that night, the phone rang. It was Perry. She left, he said in a tired voice. Said she couldn't stay with me while I supported you. She gave me an ultimatum. Either I agree with her and end things with you, or our marriage is over. And what did you say? I asked cautiously. A long pause. I said I couldn't choose between you, that you're both important to me, and that I couldn't support her in what I thought was wrong. And she left? My voice shook. Yes, Perry answered quietly. Packed up the essentials and went to Laura's. Said she'd come back for the rest of her things later. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. I didn't want this. I didn't want to ruin their marriage, their happiness. Perry, listen, I began. Maybe it's not too late to fix this. I can talk to her, tell her that it was my fault, that I manipulated you. No, he interrupted me firmly. Don't do that. It's my choice, Ralph. Mine, not yours. I can't support Audrey in what I think is wrong, even if it means the end of our marriage. I didn't know what to say. Part of me admired his integrity, the other part of me dreaded the consequences. What are you going to do? I finally asked. I don't know, he answered honestly. For now, just exist, day by day, and then we'll see. After we finished talking, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about how strangely life had turned out. I had started this conflict to regain my daughter's respect, and in the end, I seemed to have gained my son-in-law's respect and lost my daughter. Was the price too high? I didn't know. The next morning, I met Estelle again in the driveway. She was walking her little terrier and waved hello when she spotted me. How are you, Ralph? She asked with genuine concern in her voice. To be honest, I don't know, I answered. Perry chose me over Audrey. She had left him. Estelle silently took my hand and squeezed it lightly. That simple gesture of support meant more than any words of comfort. Would you like to come in for tea? She suggested. I don't think you should be alone right now. I agreed. Her apartment was cozy. Lots of books, pictures, soft light. We talked about all sorts of things: books, music, her sons living in California. Not about home, not about Audrey and Perry, just about life. And in that conversation, I found a strange comfort. It was as if the world was reminding me that even in the hardest moments, life goes on. That even after loss, you can find new connections, new relationships. 3 days had passed since the incident at the cafe. 3 days of silence and uncertainty. I hadn't called Audrey, she hadn't called me. I hadn't heard from Perry either. I tried to distract myself. I went to the park, met with friends from the support group, even went to Estelle's house for tea, but my thoughts kept returning to my daughter and our conflict. On the evening of the fourth day, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw Perry, pale with red eyes, but determined. "May I come in?" he asked. I stepped back silently, letting him in. We walked into the living room, but this time he didn't sit down on the couch but stood there, nervously clenching and unclenching his fists. "Audrey gave me a choice," he said without preamble. "Either I'm with her against you, or I'm no longer her husband." I sighed heavily. "Perry, listen." "No, you listen," he interrupted me. "I've been thinking a long time. And I decided that I couldn't support Audrey in this." I froze, unable to believe my ears. "What are you saying?" "I chose you, Ralph," he said simply. "Not because you're holding us by the throat over the house, but because you're right. The way Audrey's treated you all these years, it's wrong. And I've been a part of it. I let it happen, even encouraged it. And I'm ashamed." I slumped back in my chair, trying to comprehend his words. "Do you realize what you're saying? You're choosing an old father-in-law over a young wife?" Perry smiled weakly. "When you put it like that, it does sound crazy. But it's not about choosing between you and her. It's about choosing between right and wrong, between respect and disrespect." I tried to explain that to Audrey, but she wouldn't listen. He paced the room, then stopped at the window. "You know, I always thought of myself as a pragmatist, a person who made decisions based on profit. But it turns out there are things more important than profit: dignity, honesty, respect." "So what now?" I asked. "What's wrong with you?" "Audrey's packing," Perry said quietly. "She's going to her friend Laura's. She said she was going to file for divorce." I felt my heart clench with pain. Had it really gone that far? Is my daughter really ready to destroy a marriage because of her pride? "Maybe she'll change her mind," I said, though I didn't believe it. "When she cooled down, when she thought it over." "No," Perry shook his head. "You didn't see her. She's furious. She thinks we both betrayed her, that we conspired behind her back. She won't even listen to an explanation." He sank down on the couch, wrapping his arms around his head. "I always thought I knew my wife, but now I don't recognize her." It was as if the mask had fallen, and I saw a completely different person. I understood his feelings. I hadn't recognized my daughter in recent years either. Where is that tender, caring girl who brought me tea when I was sick? Who drew birthday cards for me? Who was proud of her father for saving people? "What are you going to do?" I asked. Perry lifted his head and looked at me with tired eyes. "I don't know. Honestly, I don't. I don't have a plan. I can't do anything else." We sat in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. It was starting to get dark outside. Another day was coming to an end, a day that changed everything. "You can stay here," I said finally. "If you want to, I have a couch." "Thanks," Perry nodded gratefully. "But I think I'd better go home. I need to, finish talking to Audrey, if that's even possible." He stood up and I walked him to the door. "I'll come back tomorrow and let you know how it went, if you don't mind." "Sure," I shook his hand. "Hang in there, Perry." When the door closed behind him, I felt a strange emptiness inside. I'd started this confrontation to regain my daughter's respect, and in the end I seemed to have lost her forever. Was the price too high? Or was it inevitable? I couldn't sleep through the night, tossing from side to side. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Audrey's face. First, the little girl laughing on the swing set, then the teenager stubbornly asserting her opinion, then the young woman happy on her wedding day, and finally her face in the cafe, contorted with anger and pain. My daughter, my only daughter. In the morning, exhausted by insomnia, I called Estelle. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge. Perry chose me, I said when she opened the door. Audrey was leaving him. Estelle hugged me silently and let me into the apartment. Over a cup of coffee, I told her everything that had happened yesterday. She listened attentively without interrupting. I don't know what to do, I admitted at the end. Things had gone too far. I didn't mean for this to happen. Of course you didn't, Estelle said softly. No one did. But sometimes our actions have consequences we can't foresee. I lost my daughter. My voice shook. You don't have to, Estelle put her hand on mine. Give her time. Right now she's in shock, she's angry. But when her emotions settle, maybe she'll be ready to talk. And if she isn't? I asked quietly. Then you'll have to live with it, she replied simply. And find happiness in what you have, not grieve for what you don't. Her words were harsh, but true, and there was a strange wisdom in them that I couldn't help but recognize. Perry called toward evening. She's gone, he said in a tired voice. Packed up the essentials and left. Said she'd send for the rest of her stuff later. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Me too, he sighed. I tried to talk to her, to explain my position, but she wouldn't listen. She said I was just as manipulative as you are, that we both used the house to control her. I closed my eyes. The pain from those words was almost physical. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know, Perry answered honestly. For now, I'm just sitting in an empty house trying to realize that my life just fell apart. Do you want me to come over? I offered, surprised by my own words. Pause. Then, yes, that would be good. Thank you, Ralph. The house on Magnolia Avenue looked the same as it always did, well-maintained, beautiful, the epitome of the American dream. But inside it felt cold and empty, like the life had gone out of it with Audrey's departure. Perry met me on the doorstep. He was unshaven with a crumpled shirt and eyes red from sleep. Thanks for coming, he said, letting me inside. There were half-empty glasses of whiskey in the living room. On the coffee table was a picture of Audrey and Perry on their wedding day. They looked so happy, so full of hope. Did she call? I asked, sitting down in the chair. No, Perry shook his head. But her friend Laura sent a message. Said Audrey was fine, but she didn't want to talk to anyone. Not to me, not to you. I nodded. That was to be expected. I keep thinking, Perry said slowly, that I could have just agreed with her. Say you're wrong, that we should move out. Keep the peace in the family. Why didn't I do that? Because it would have been a lie, I answered quietly. And you wouldn't be able to live with that lie. Perry looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Yeah, you're probably right. I always thought of myself as a man who was all about profit. But it turns out there are some things I can't sacrifice, not even for the woman I love. We sat in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. Then Perry suddenly asked, What's going to happen to the house, Ralph? Are you going to sell it? No, I shook my head. It's your house. It's yours and Audrey's. I never planned on taking it. But now. He didn't finish the sentence. Things are different now, I agreed. But that doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind. The house is still yours. Or yours if Audrey doesn't come back. Perry looked at me in surprise. Why? After everything that's happened? Because I didn't want the house, I answered simply. I wanted respect, and you showed it to me, even if it was in such a strange way. The next day, Perry asked me to move in with him, temporarily, until things settled down. I hesitated. It didn't seem right, taking my daughter's place in her house. But on the other hand, I felt responsible for Perry. In a way, I'd ruined his family. I had to help him deal with the consequences. So I agreed. I packed up the essentials and moved into the guest room of the Magnolia Avenue house. It was a strange feeling, living in a house that legally belonged to you, but always felt foreign. The first few days were awkward. Perry and I didn't know how to act around each other. We'd have breakfast in silence, then he'd leave for work. I'd be alone in the big, empty house. In the evening, we'd have dinner together, exchanging meaningless sentences, and then we'd go to our rooms. But gradually, something began to change. Perry asked me about my work as a fire inspector, and I told him a few stories from my practice. He was an attentive listener. Then I asked him about his job as a financial analyst, and he explained some aspects I hadn't thought about before. Over the weekend, we gardened together, mowing the lawn, trimming bushes, fixing a broken step on the veranda. Working side by side, we talked about more personal things, our relationship with Audrey, how we'd both been wrong in our approach to her. You know, I always thought she was a lot like you, Perry said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Just as stubborn, just as principled. Maybe that's why it's so hard for you two to get along. Maybe, I agreed. Verna always said Audrey and I were like two sheep on the bridge. Neither one of us wanted to give way. Perry laughed, and it seemed so genuine, so normal. Like we could really be a family. Weird, incomplete, but family. I still hadn't heard from Audrey. Perry tried to call her, but she didn't answer. One time she sent a text saying, "I'll send for my stuff next week. Don't want to see you. Both of you." That message knocked us out for a few days. Perry started drinking a lot in the evenings again, and I withdrew. But then, as if by tacit agreement, we decided to move on. Life went on, even if Audrey didn't want to be a part of it. Estelle called often, wondering how we were doing. One day we invited her over for dinner. She brought apple pie, and we spent a pleasant evening, the three of us. No tension, no hard memories. Just three adults enjoying each other's company. 2 weeks after Audrey left, Perry and I were sitting on the veranda watching the sunset. The summer evening was warm and quiet. The smell of jasmine and barbecue wafted from somewhere. "I filed the deed to the house," I said, without looking at Perry. "In your name." He turned to me, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do," I answered simply. "This is your house. It's always been yours. I just held it up as collateral without knowing why." Perry was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Thank you, Ralph. That means a lot to me." "I hope Audrey comes back," I said. "Not to me, but at least to you. You were a good couple." "I hope so too," Perry sighed. "But I won't wait forever. Life goes on, right?" I nodded, looking up at the sunset sky. Life did go on. Despite the losses, despite the pain, we adapt, find new connections, new meanings. "You know," Perry said after a long pause, "I never thought it was possible to start over at 63, but you've proven that it's possible. You didn't give up, didn't accept the role that was forced upon you. You fought for your dignity, and I respect that." His words touched me more deeply than I expected. Respect. That's what I wanted all along, and strangely enough, I got it from the person I least expected it from. "I never thought I'd find an ally in my brother-in-law," I replied with a slight smile. "Life is full of surprises." We sat in silence, watching the last rays of the sun turn the sky orange and purple. I thought about Verna, about what she would say now. Would she approve of my actions or disapprove? I would never know, but I hoped she would have understood why I did what I did. I thought about Audrey, about the gulf that separated us. Would we ever be able to bridge it? Or was this chapter of my life closed forever? The pain of that thought was sharp, but it wasn't as unbearable as it used to be. And I thought about the fact that the person sitting next to me, whom I had always considered a stranger, had suddenly become someone close to me. Not a son, of course, but a friend. A friend? An ally? I didn't know what to call this relationship, but it gave me a strange sense of fulfillment. Sometimes you have to sacrifice even the closest of relationships to maintain your dignity. It's a bitter truth I learned too late. But maybe all is not lost. Maybe from the ashes of old relationships, new, healthier, and more respectful ones can be born. The sun disappeared over the horizon, leaving behind only a thin streak of light. Another day had come to an end, but tomorrow would bring a new one. And who knows what it will bring?